Okay, computer-aided drafting students, this is Mr. Voigt. I'm here to introduce you to, I've already done some of this, but to introduce you to and make very clear some of the things on our screen. Up here, just as a review, on our graphical screen here, we got all these tabs. And on each tab, you have these different panels that make up the ribbon. So every tab has a ribbon made up of these different panels, and in those panels are different commands. And some of these panels even drop down and have more commands underneath them with those little arrows. Okay, the one we're going to use 90% of the time or more is the home tab with the different panels on it. Right now we're using mainly the draw panel. We're going to learn a lot of the unit on AutoCAD is about drawing, modifying, annotating, which means putting text in there. And one of the tools we use is using layers with all of that. There's also other things on here. We'll get into the properties a little bit. You'll use these utilities things sometimes. So we use the home ribbon a lot. We also get into the annotate tab and some of the different panels in here. Center lines, for instance, we might use multi-leader lines, and so forth. But most of these tabs we spend very little time on. Home is where we're going to be most of the time. So the last thing about that, if you don't see this entire ribbon, there's this little white arrow right here. When I toggle it, it toggles through. So there's the full ribbon with all the different things and the drop-down menus. When I click it once, it goes to just the panel name, and then all the different things underneath it drop down when you scroll over it. Then it goes to just the names. Then it disappears altogether. Then it comes back in full view. So choose what you like. I like it this way. You can toggle through to what you like. Okay. What I really want to talk about down here is this is called our status bar. And so I really want to talk about that. I've already mentioned the command line, but I would put the command line and the status bar. These work in conjunction with the stuff up here. So you got to work back and forth. So anyway, this status bar displays all kinds of different things, some of which you're going to use, some of which you're not. You can turn things you're not going to use off right here. But so what is showing up down here are the things that are checked in here. You don't know what all this stuff is necessarily. I told you to turn coordinates on. Another thing that might be really useful to turn on is units, because it's not usually on. It goes right here. See how it comes in here and it tells you what units you're drawing in, if you're in decimal or you're in architectural or so forth. It doesn't allow you to put millimeters, inches, and all that in there, but so you may or may not want that in there. Anyway, you could go in and customize that once you got good enough at this and you knew what you wanted up. For now, it's really, if you get coordinates up, I think that'll help you, and the rest of this stuff should be pretty good. Okay. Remember, we were turning off everything except for these two. Anything that's in here can be toggled on and off like this. You just click it. When it's highlighted, it's on. When it's not highlighted, it's off. Okay. The last thing on our display here is we are drawing in what we call model space, but lots of times you want to put this on some sort of sheet and print it. And that is done in these, what we call layout, or other sources call this paper space. And really what this is if I took a piece of paper, as you can see, this is basically the size of a piece of paper, and I cut this out of it, it would look like what we would call a frame. And if I take that and put it in front of my face and I go outside, I can only see what's within that frame. Okay. If I had a really big drawing, or I had a house that was life size, and I hold that frame up in front of my face, I'm only going to see the part of the house that is inside the frame. Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm taking this frame and I'm putting it on this model. So I'm only going to see, if I have a really big drawing here, I'm only going to see the part of that model that is inside of that frame. So if I have something that's really big over here and I want it to fit in this model space, then I might have to scale it down so it fits in there. So it's just like a little window into your model space, but it's only so big. Okay. We'll get into that more later. I just want you to know what that is. So you really want to be in model space right now. By the way, I can draw while when I'm in this space, just like I can draw when I'm in this space. I'm just not gonna, whoops, I'm just not going to see the whole model necessarily. Okay. Last thing, when you move around in here, let's say I draw something. I draw a couple lines. I draw a circle. Okay. If I want to move, so let's say I want to take this and I want to get it down on this part of my screen, the wheel, so that when I push the wheel or pull the wheel, it zooms me in and out, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. But if I want to move this drawing down here, I push and hold the wheel like it's a mouse button, and it gives me that hand. That's called pan. And I can just move it down to get it in the center, more in the center of my screen, or if I want that off to the side while I do something else over here, and so forth. Obviously, my green line is always my y-axis, and my red line is always my x-axis. So that's my pan tool. Okay. I've already shown you the pick tools here and here, so I'm not going to do that anymore. So that's kind of how you navigate around the screen. What I really want to do, and I got to come back here, I got to see how much time I have left. I'm only at 6 minutes. I get 15 minutes here. Hopefully I won't take that long. What I really want to do is show you a couple of these things down here. We have been entering our coordinates, right? So right now I know I'm at 9:15, coordinate 9:15. And if I want to draw my next line, I can just pull and click. So when I pull and click, that is a relative. I'm drawing with relative coordinates, right? I can count over and I can count up and I can click. So I'm going 8 over and 9 up from this point. That's doing a relative type of thing. If I wanted to do it absolute, I would say, okay, how far over from the y-axis am I? And how far up from the x-axis am I? And I type those in. We've been through that. But when I click and do this, I'm drawing relative. Now, I have to count using my grid and my snap right now, unless I turn on what we call dynamic entry or dynamic input. You see how it gives me now? It says this line is now 31.5 inches long. Well, actually, what it's giving me now, it's not giving me distances. This is giving me my absolute measurements. So I am now 37.5 from my y-axis, and I'm 15 up from my x-axis. That's what it's giving me, absolute location now. There are ways to make that be relative. And I'm going to, in another video, I'm going to show you how to make my absolute locations in my, this is dynamic input. So it gives me my boxes to type those next coordinates right next to my cursor. That's what that means. Okay. I'm going to tell you in the next video how to make that. So this is absolute coordinates that I would type in here, right? You can set it so that it's relative coordinates, and I'll show you how to do that on the next video. But anyway, I can toggle that on and off right here. Okay, so that's what that is. This is ortho. What that means is when I draw, it's only going to let me draw in 90-degree increments. Okay, now that's only useful in certain situations, but if I have ortho on, it's only going to let me draw 90 degrees from wherever I'm starting from. Okay, so that's ortho. I really don't want that on again. This is what we call polar tracking, and I'll talk about that in a minute. This is isometric. So when I click, whoops, I got to get out of I had a line command going there. If I get into this, it gives me isometric graph. And that means these lines are all drawn at 30-degree increments from one another. I don't want to get into it too deeply. You're not probably going to use that. So we're just going to click that off. Probably not going to ever use this. This and this are the reason I'm having this video. Okay. You will use these often, and you will have them turned off often. So the things I think you're going to use to help you draw are going to be dynamic input, ortho, and then what we call object snap. And what that is, if I turn it on and I get into a command, I go in here and you see these little green things that pop up. This is probably what's been when you've been trying to draw and you're like, it won't let me go where I want to go. It's because of these. Okay. And I came over and I just clicked that off and then it worked. So as you can see, there's a green square, there's a green square, there's a green triangle, there's a green diamond, and there's a green circle. What it's doing is it's snapping to geometric points. So this is a circle. And that green diamond is the quadrant. That's 3 o'clock, right? That's exactly what they would call 0 degrees on this circle. There, that's exactly 90 degrees on this circle. That's 12 o'clock. That's exactly 180 degrees on this circle, 9 o'clock. That's exactly 270 degrees. If this is 0, 90, 180, 270, 360, or 0. So it snaps to the quadrants. That's 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 9 o'clock on our, okay? It snaps right to them. So that is quadrant. So what happens is you have all these geometric points that you can snap to. Right now, obviously, I have quadrant was what was coming up just a second ago. The center of my circle is the one that when I come over here, it gives me the circle. And then midpoint were the squares, and I'm sorry, midpoint was the triangle, the green triangle, and endpoint were the squares. And then I haven't shown you these, but we don't need to get into all of them. So when I have this on and I'm in a command, it will snap to those points. That means it gets me exactly at the end of that line. Exactly. Even if it doesn't end on the grid right there. Right? So if I come here in here and I get rid of my snap and I draw a line like this, see how it doesn't, that's not on my grid snap, and I come back to it, it will snap me exactly to the end of that line. That's something you couldn't do without this tool. You could get close, but you couldn't get it perfect. Okay, so that's object snap. Sometimes, however, let's say I want to start a line right here. Right? Right there, I want to start. I click, and it let me. And I want to end right here. And it let me do that. That is strange. What if I want to come here and I want to start right there? See where my cursor is? And you see when I click it, took me to that thing. Sometimes this is what happens. Okay? I want to start a line right there for some reason. And it won't let me. It will not let me get there. It puts me there by default. So if that happens, you got to go down, and that's what was happening to some of you. You got to go down and turn this off. Then you got to go draw that line. Okay? Then you can toggle it back on if you need it. Okay, so that is object snap. This, excuse me, is object snap with these extension lines. You see how that gives me a green line going straight up? That helps me. It gives you different lines to help you draw. So let me show you. I put a rectangle on here, and I draw up from there. Let's say I want to come up. Let's say I want to square this off, and I want to be parallel to this line and this line. So I just go back to my line command, and you see how it gives me that? But it also will give me, when I go down and touch that corner, it should give me, see how I can get it right on the corner? It helps me. So that is this right here. It says snapping reference lines, object snap reference lines. It will help me draw things that'll extend those. Now, there's times when that'll get you in trouble, so you got to turn it off. But it's there to help you draw if you need it. Okay, so these are just tools. I am coming close to the end of my time, so I'm gonna end this video. But that helps get you in line here. All right, guys.